Coming up next. Stay tuned to learn more about the state of blockchain education at major universities all around the world. Reimagine 2020.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reimagine 2020. I'm your host, Adam, with a very diverse and experienced group today. Very fortunate to have my panelists join us during these trying times, but they're willing to give us their time and their insights and knowledge to really, for the viewers out there, to really understand what's been going on in the market for the last few years. And so what we can do is, my panelists have bridged traditional companies with the digital world. You can expect them to shed some light into the core meaning of what blockchain is today. You'll be surprised in what you hear from my panelists today. And I'll go ahead and kick this off. If one of you, AJ, we're going to start with you. Give us your name, background, how you got involved, and take it from there.
Sure. So I'm Alvaro Jimenez. I'm one of the co-founders of Unity. And basically my background, it started in institutional private equity real estate. After that, I transitioned as a manager in Microsoft for digital transformation with an emphasis in AI and machine learning. After that, I moved into the world of blockchain, into a VC fund where I managed a portfolio of 31 international blockchain companies, taking them to market with a team of 14 people. And after that, I started my own. So I started Gaudium Capital. In 2019, we did 7 investments in different geographies in blockchain companies. We had several clients too. And then we merged with 2 bigger groups, Honan Group and Trinity Exponentials, and we created Unity. And so Unity focuses in exponential technologies such as artificial intelligence, VR, AR, telerobotics, cybersecurity, and obviously blockchain. So that's what we're doing. We have a VC arm, we have an incubator, and we have an advisory arm.
All right, thank you for that. Looks like strong resume there. And Geoffrey, you want to give a little quick background of yourself and what you've been doing and how you got involved in, in blockchain?
Sure. So my name is Geoffrey Cann. I am an author, professional speaker, and advisor to the oil and gas industry on the wave of digital change that's coming at the sector. I was first exposed to blockchain technologies back in, I'm going to guess 2013-ish, 2014-ish. When first they appeared, I became much more interested in 2016 and wrote a paper on the implications of blockchain and cryptocurrencies on taxation policy, because how do you tax these assets is still an open question even today. The research that I do with oil and gas companies, though, highlights the role of blockchain as a critical enabler to transforming the industry. And it transforms the industry in a whole number of very subtle but quite critical ways. These days, I sit on the board of a blockchain startup in Calgary, which is actually nothing to do with oil and gas. It's focused on tracking artworks, where paintings that painters produce, tracking those works of art through their life so that the artist can obtain a residual royalty as that artwork is sold all throughout its life. I'm also advising a blockchain company based in Barcelona and London, which has a use case and application in oil and gas, and an investor with Repsol, which I can just share a little bit about later on. And so these days, my work is helping oil and gas companies raise their digital awareness, not just on blockchain, but on artificial intelligence and machine learning and cloud computing and a whole range of digital innovations that have tremendous effect on the industry.
Great, thank you for that. touch on a lot of points there that I'll probably conclude after this. Hugo, give us some insight. What do you do? Who do you work for? What's your background and how you got involved in blockchain?
After graduate MBA, first I'm Hugo. I'm Hugo Lee and from South Korea. After graduate MBA, I worked at the securities company in Korea. And after that, I worked at the GS Cartex, which is a sub company for the Chevron. So I focus on the strategy in the oil and refinery company for 3 years. And in do that, I charged in the new business in the refinery company. So do that, I feel that lots of refinery and also lots of traditional businesses centralized in the not only fiat but also the digital. So all things always look some control the person, govern the person. So when I met to the Bitcoin or Ethereum, which is a decentralized environment, I fell into that, and then I felt that I need to change our business area. So I moved to the Blockcrafters, and when I joined in the Blockcrafters, I take a charge in a crypto finance head, and then I invest some crypto company, and also we have a crypto fund, so manage it, and I invest in our assets. To do that, about 1.5 years ago, I felt that most of people think cryptocurrency will be used as one of some unique utility for the larger business area, but we think more people think cryptocurrency as an asset. So we change our business model. Actually, we add our business model and we create the HaruBank. And now I lead the HaruBank team, and I had the head of the HaruBank, and I focus on how to make our profit allocate to our users.
Who would have known? I got 3 oil and gas individuals on one panel without even trying, and the common denominator here is blockchain. So that's pretty good. Thank you all for doing that. For the viewers out there, as you can see, blockchain touches all kinds of aspects, and it's a community here. I've met these 3 individuals separately, and together, collectively, everybody has some insight and has shared experiences. So, those watching, the overall arching goal of our conference, Reimagine 2020, is to bring you reality, bright minds in the crypto space, just bright minds in general that are involved in blockchain, that add value to the ways that we might do business in the future. So my goal here and plan is to really separate the noise from the facts. So without further ado, let's kind of kick this off. And I'll start off with Geoffrey here. Coming from, the oil and gas energy, that's, decades of deep money, oil money. It seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's innovation on one aspect of getting, the raw material out, fracking, and all these other advancements of drilling. And, maybe you can shed some light into how blockchain has gone into this industry and for what reason and why.
Sure. So in the oil and gas industry, a way to think about it is that there are 3 chains, 3 parts of the industry. So part 1 is the oil and gas product itself. And we call that the value chain. And the chain is extremely long, and this is a very, very big industry. It's $1.5 trillion. And so the molecules come out of the ground and they process their way all the way through the value chain, changing hands, changing custodies, going from one company to the next. And there's a separate chain, which is the money chain. The money chain travels along, and they have to join up, obviously, because, as you do a transaction of volume from one customer to another, there's a change of funds too. So, but the money change runs along in parallel to the value chain. And now there's a 3rd chain, and it's really important, and that's a regulatory chain. We need to know where the product has come from, who produced it. For example, there are frequently sanctions imposed on countries who ship and sell oil because of for various reasons. And so you have these 3 chains: value, money, regulatory, and they all have to line up, right? And historically, the industry has kept the 3 chains separate. But now with the power of blockchain, you can actually bring the three chains together, because you can do things like track on blockchain, custody transfer, events, ownership, title, even the money. And so that's the major secret to how blockchain will transform oil and gas. Today, there are just examples where companies are working to fix one or multiple components of those chains. And sometimes it's just on the one part of the chain rather than a cross chain. But the early signs are very clear that the three chains have the potential to become much more aligned and co-joined through this innovative new technology.
And I meant to ask you leading into this, like, what is blockchain to you? You know, blockchain's been around since 2008, but really it's the components of blockchain have been around for decades, right?
Yeah.
The buzzword came out in 2008 when Bitcoin came out and all that.
Yep.
But what, and I meant to lead in with that, but yeah, what is blockchain to you? And obviously it's tapping into, your field, which this type of, technology wasn't maybe tapping into it yet back, when you were involved. But what is it to you? What does it mean?
Well, I often get asked this question, please explain what this is, because frequently in oil and gas, company leadership are sufficiently distant from this technology that it's a complete mystery. So the simple example I use is accounts payable and accounts receivable. Let's say, Adam, you're selling and I'm buying. So your sale, if you like, is a sales order, and my purchase is a purchase order. So I've created a ledger that keeps track of my purchase. You've created your own ledger, which keeps track of your sale. But they have quite a bit of information in common: number of units, the price we've agreed to pay, when we're going to deliver. And but we keep these ledgers separate. The fact that they're separate creates room for all kinds of confusion and error and so forth. As an example, 9% of all crude oil that's traded on oceans today is in error. One or the other, the two parties on those trades, disagree with what was supposed to be shipped. The one ledger says one thing, the other ledger says the other. What blockchain to me is, in my simple explanation, is imagine if you and I could agree to put common data like that into an immutable record that cannot be changed, which represents truth. Now, whatever's in my ledger, it doesn't really matter what truth might be, which is what's on the blockchain. And armed with that, we can start to eliminate things like the error rates that creep into these processes. And again, the three chains: the value chain of product moving, the financial records, and the regulatory questions that need to be met. So that's my simple explanation. And I got to tell you, there's not a single executive I've ever met that doesn't go, "Oh, that I can understand," because they all understand purchase and sale and the fact that they're separate ledgers.
And I'll go around the table here, but real quick, beyond kind of the technical aspects, what can blockchain do? Like efficiency, does it open up, other business models, revenue models? Is it the future, right? Like per se, like what's your concept of what blockchain is and how it can help?
Who are you asking?
Oh, sorry. I was coming back to you. Like you gave a good example of kind of the DLT, right? The ledger part. But in the grand scheme of things, for like the users at home, these students that are trying to understand, I mean, we're going to go through a lot of use cases right now, but what is blockchain? What can it do for the world? Or what's your thought on blockchain?
Well, if you look at a standard company, an organization that is in a commercial operation, a significant component of that business is going to be tied up in administering the various processes and record keeping inside that company. And a lot of that is managed and administered by people. And of course, under our current world, pandemic world, imagine a series of dominoes all set up, and you start pushing the first domino, and then all the dominoes fall over. Well, those dominoes are like people in a process doing work. If I pull one of those dominoes out of the chain, the whole chain will simply come to a halt because one of the dominoes is missing. Now you have to slide that domino back in and start the process again. Business all around the world is composed of these chains of actions that have to happen from person to person. And they're frequently falling over because of someone's on vacation, or they've fallen ill, or the process has an error, and so forth. There was a study done in Australia a few years ago by Deloitte Access Economics, and they estimated that fully 25% of the entire Australian economy, the whole country, every industry, was comprised of individuals working in process areas to assure process integrity. We call it red tape and bureaucracy. 25%. That's a pretty sophisticated economy in Australia. They haven't had a recession in 30 years. They're going to get one this year because of the pandemic, but they've been trucking along with tremendous success for a very long time. But 25% of their economy is tied up in administering this process. So what happens if we could release a significant chunk of that latent capacity in our economies, which is tied up in making sure that these processes actually work with integrity? That's the real prize of blockchain. And that's why there's so many individuals, once you spend a bit of time thinking about it, that's why so many individuals get quite switched on about the prospects that this technology can bring to bear.
Well, interesting points. And I kind of want to lead into you, AJ, as far as what blockchain is to you, because as what you mentioned in your introduction of, you're touching a lot of technologies, right? And so you probably have another perspective of how blockchain plays into, your strategy, your future. Give some insight into people that are tuning in right now to like what your thoughts are and your take on blockchain. What does it mean to you?
So for me, blockchain is a new technology that is going to open a whole realm of possibilities, right? So that the same way as the internet opened the whole realm of possibilities, blockchain is going to allow us to create a layer of value on top of that layer that we already have, right? So to give you a couple of examples, and following up on one that Geoffrey has already, touched on, efficiencies, right? So to issue debt as of today in traditional paper form, or even if it's digital, it's extremely administrative intensive. There's a whole regulatory compliance, and debt changes hands many times, particularly once it gets securitized, right? So then the auditors come in, right? And you need to audit all of the trail of who has purchased the debt and sold it to who, right? And it probably has changed 100 times from hands to hands, right? If the same process, you have it on blockchain technology, the auditors come in, you give them access to see the blockchain, and you can say, like, literally, like, knock yourself out, right? Because it's 100% traceable, and they can see where the debt, each piece of debt is at every single point in time, and what trajectory has it followed. So literally, you can reduce the cost of issuing and tracing the debt and having the compliance and everything in more than 40%, right? So we have already seen big issuances of debt by some of the biggest banks in the world. So for instance, Société Générale, which is the biggest bank in France, issued close to $125 million of debt on the blockchain, particularly on the Ethereum protocol. It was this one. Banco Santander, which is the biggest bank in Spain, also did run a test of about 55 million. And the success, it has been very, very successful, right? They have cut costs tremendously. So, it's very realistic to think that in the future, most of the debt is going to be issued on the blockchain, right? Now let's move to a more simple and close example, because sometimes people say, okay, but I want to give me an example of something that I can check today, right? Okay, so we have COVID-19 that has hit us all, right? And it has disrupted the supply chain. And now this time they say that it was passed from an animal to a human, but in the future it could be passed through food, for instance, right? So how are you going to trace, a potential issue in the food supply, other than with a technology that is capable of tracing the entire supply chain, right? Which in this case is blockchain. So with blockchain, you can trace anything from the source to the shelf in the supermarket, So let's say, for instance, coffee beans. You can see where they were produced. You can see at what temperature were they transported, what type of humidity, exactly which points did they follow during the transportation, and everything until it reaches the supermarket, right? And by the time it reaches the supermarket, a consumer can go and scan a QR code with their phone, and in the blockchain, they might not even know that it's on the blockchain, but it is on the blockchain. They can see all of the trajectory that those coffee beans have followed, if they actually have the certificate of being organic, if they actually have the certificate of fair trade, and so on and so forth. And they move from a bunch of claims to a verified source of truth, right? Because then they can check the certificates, and they can check that every single box has been checked, right? So we have already implemented projects like this. Juan Valdez is the biggest coffee producer in South America, and we implemented this in their supply chain. Blockchain rice can be bought in China today in JD.com, which is the equivalent of Amazon.com, right? So the consumers can go and buy a packet of rice verified and traced on the blockchain, and they can scan a QR code and see the whole thing. That's one of our solutions that was done through one of our sister companies called Penta Global. So everyone can go and everyone can check, or they can go and buy those products, and they will interact with the QR code, but the underlying technology is blockchain, and it brings that traceability. I'll stop it there, just for the sake of this question, but we can touch on many other different applications that we have seen and companies that we have invested in. Those are real life applications where blockchain technology is being successfully applied and the user can already see and play with.
No, totally. I think we've already gone through two kind of examples, right, of how blockchain penetrates these certain industries, applications, use cases, issues that on the front end, maybe the user doesn't, nobody notices kind of what's going on the back end. And I think for our viewers right now, they're getting some insight into that. Hugo, for yourself, what does blockchain mean to you? And not from a technical standpoint of like block size and DLT, but yeah, what does it mean to you since you're in the space now,
In the beginning, I think blockchain as one of the vehicle for the getting put the new things like a smartphone or AI, but it is totally different two things. One is decentralization, and second thing is it has a symbol of value such as a cryptocurrency. Because, for example, if AI do not have any symbol of a value, what it means that there are lots of securities based on the AI technology company, but it is different. But cryptocurrency is totally connected to the blockchain, and this is a symbol of value of blockchain. So because of decentralization features, lots of people make interest in this area, but based on this decentralization, it is naturally have inefficiency. Because of inefficiency, lots of companies try to do more things based on the blockchain to the public users, but they just feel uncomfortable in this blockchain business. Because of that, lots of users feel difficulty and unaccustomed to this area. So those people only focus on what I said before, the symbol of value cryptocurrency. So they only focus on the cryptocurrency. Most of people do not care about the blockchain these days. Because of that, lots of people just think blockchain or cryptocurrency as an asset. But blockchain's theme is so attractive because decentralization, so lots of people already have an amount of BTC, Ethereum, which is an asset. But most of public users feel stressed in getting a profit or do trading in a volatile market. But a few whales or few institutions make a profit based on this volatile market. They know how to make a profit in this volatile market. So how they make a profit based on the gaps in the exchange, and not just the exchange. Lots of new exchange based on the margins, options, futures. They make a new market, and this new market also has a lot of gaps in this market. Based on these gaps, few whales and institutions get a profit, but public users don't know how to make a profit in this stable way. So I focus on this hidden or secret profit to allocate to our users. And I think this gap and this inefficiency maybe exist over a long time, because this system is rooted from the decentralization. So I try to make a fair market in this cryptocurrency market.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. So you're bridging the gaps, leveraging blockchain.
Yeah, right. Because still lots of business based on the people who think similar idea with me. They always focus cryptocurrency as an asset, and they make some new things. But these new things make this idea from the traditional finance market. But at the beginning of the traditional finance market or history of those markets, they are always some inefficiency. And based on this inefficiency, there are lots of crises or something. But this crypto market haven't experienced this crisis so short time. So, this volatility is amazing, and this volatility make another chance for some professional peoples. So I worked at this market more than 2 years. I catch this is so easy, but public users do not make a sense to how to make this stable profit. So I get this, and then I try to allocate this profit to the users.
Nice. That's pretty interesting, right? We just kind of touched on a little bit of finance here, leveraging blockchain. We're still in discussions with oil and gas, and AJ, you've touched on applications in the supply chain, and just kind of you brought life to what a user can visualize, as far as food, farm to table. Geoffrey, I've had some conversations recently with some of the top, oil and gas companies, and they still, based off of that conversation, they're still learning. Where's the industry? What inning is that the industry in? Like first inning, relative to a baseball game, like where I thought they would maybe be further along, but some of these consortiums are still trying to understand some use cases, and I'm sure AJ can chime in after, but what's kind of the hold up there for, the barriers or challenges of adoption? Or is it education that's the barrier, to implementing this stuff? Because I was surprised that, they were asking for more questions, for questions. Yeah.
Yeah. So the oil and gas industry, by its nature, is extremely risk averse. And we're all grateful for that, actually, because the product is hazardous. It explodes. We're very grateful that they take their time and they don't introduce change abruptly that they haven't fully thought through. And but on the same token, that also means that they're very, very cautious about adopting things that they don't quite understand. They don't understand how they work. And all novel and new technology fits into that category. I'll just use cloud computing as an illustration. It's been around for 15 years, and still many oil and gas companies stare at it as, I'm not sure I want my data in the cloud. So even things that are highly de-risked and very, very stable are still meet with a fair level of internal resistance and confusion about, just how much risk is at stake by adoption. So that's as I see it, is kind of the main reason. It's a deep-seated cultural norms within the industry that tell it to proceed with caution, take great care, manage change carefully, do not introduce things abruptly. And when you think about it, that's the 180 degrees away from digital, which is agile, and we do things quickly, and we try things to find out which will work and which ones will not. Think about it. When was the last time you would have embraced an oil and gas person who did something that failed? Like, failure is not tolerated in this industry.
Not at all.
It's a problem. So it's not surprising to me at all that it takes time for these technologies to be embraced.
And how long ago, not to interrupt, but how long ago was blockchain introduced? Or like a couple years? I know
in oil and gas specifically?
Yeah.
So I certainly was exposed to the early adaptations of it, particularly in the royalty area in 2015, 2016. So we are talking 4 or 5 years.
Okay, yeah, a little while. And has the industry progressed a little bit more?
Yes, the industry has progressed quite a bit actually, but I would say it's still very much back to your baseball analogy. I was sort of toying with, are we in warm up before the game even starts?
I was going to say, have the game started?
The game has absolutely started. Just to give you some examples, Shell has invested in a blockchain company in London. Repsol has placed an investment in a Madrid and London-based blockchain startup to try and understand the technologies. There is a consortium in the United States called the Onshore-Offshore Consortium, which has piloted a handful of use case trials. There's a blockchain company dealing with fuel issues in Singapore called Keychain. And Iberia Airlines is working with blockchain technology to deal with fuel sales and fuel transactions. A company called VAKT in Europe kicked off last year. It's a major trading system that using blockchain that facilitates trading transactions between trading partners in oil and gas. The Department of Homeland Security in the United States has been running a trial of blockchain technology to track crude oil parcels as they cross international borders between Canada and the United States, to try and understand how blockchain technology could facilitate the tracking of crude cargoes. And so there's lots of what I would call green sprouts, like little points where you can say, oh, there's a trial underway. But if you go into your regular typical oil and gas concern, this is still very much a novel technology where there's still lots of exercises underway to try and identify use cases and places where there would be great value release.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And AJ, maybe just to kind of get your thoughts on that, as far as, this technology kind of running its course, you're obviously in touch with enterprises in general, and these other technologies. So what do you think some of from what you see, are some of the barriers or challenges working with these teams? I mean, are they interested in blockchain, and are they quick to run pilots and stuff, or where do you see it fitting in there?
That's a very good question. So here's the deal, right? Let's start with the oil and gas industry. We all know that currently oil and gas is under extreme pressure, right? Who is going to win? Whoever has the lower cost per barrel, right? So if your cost of production is low, you're going to survive. If it's below the current price, right? If your cost is above the current price, you're dead in the water, right? So then the question is, how do you reduce your cost, right? The reason why the oil and gas industry has been so successful in the US was because of the discovery of fracking, right? And new technologies that allowed to reduce the cost of the US barrel of oil tremendously, right? So then, the next question is, what technologies are going to allow for the next wave of cutting the costs even more? And the answer is very simple. It's going to be AI technology, it's going to be blockchain technology, and it's going to be similar technologies, right? So, there's going to be the adopters and the non-adopters. But those who adopt, they'll cut their costs, the first ones, and they'll probably have higher chances of survival. those who refuse and follow traditional, stands, they'll probably remain with higher costs and eventually be wiped out, right? And is the exact same thing as when the cloud started. A lot of people and a lot of businesses decided to stay on premise, right? Some others were immediate switch to the cloud, right? So if you're company A and I'm company B, right, and we are exactly equal and we're competing versus each other, and I use way better technologies that make me way more productive and cut my costs, right? Which one do you think is going to end up winning, right? The same goes with the use of technologies such as AI. If your company is equal to mine and I have the help of AI technology on my side, who do you think is going to win? Like if we're technologically more advanced, we're going to wipe you out pretty quickly, right? Like that's the story of Amazon versus traditional retail, right? That's the story of companies moving to selling online versus companies not moving to selling online. That's the story of companies having an online presence versus companies that refused to have an online presence. When the cloud started, a lot of people said, oh, the cloud is a fad, and 10 years later, they have either moved to the cloud or they have filed for bankruptcy, So this is something very, very similar, right? Like these technologies, they provide a cutting-edge competitive advantage to the early adopters, and eventually those who refuse to adopt them, they're wiped out by people who have bigger guns, and that's what we're going to see. And we're going to see it in oil and gas. We're going to see it in enterprise, in pretty much every single sector, right? Yeah. It's just like if you get into a fight and someone is throwing stones and the other one has, missiles of mass destruction, which one do you think is going to win, right? It's that's how competition is. Like the one who has the better equipment is the one who wins.
Hugo, to kind of transition to you as well. I mean, you're in South Korea. What's kind of the landscape there as far as maybe blockchain adoption or some of the challenges there? Is there a lot of momentum?
Actually, about 2 years before, South Korea is one of the hot area for the blockchain and cryptocurrency. But due to the lot of adoption is failure, so many Korean project is still do not make us some attractive plan for the future. Because of this, lots of people who have interest in the blockchain change their eye to the trading and investment. Actually, I think lots of times to what is the reason for the change. The root is the what I said before, decentralization. Because of decentralization, there are no governor in this market. So it is good for the most of people because it's fair, but it lose the speed. If the governor has some market, if the governor is a good person like Obama somewhere, they make a good environment and make a good future based on their good idea. But there are no governor, and most of people can do everything in this market, so the speed always lose and make some inefficiency. Because of this, some projects need a lot of help or something, but most of projects work each and each, so they do not make a cooperation or something good route for make us some good things. Because of this, Korean market is so depressed, I think. So most of people who have an interest in the blockchain, so they have a lot of tokens because of ICO. They still have want to know more about the crypto project, but the project do not have a dynamics or to do something more. Because of this, lots of users only focus on the trading or something, keep their assets. It's a Korean atmosphere these days.
Yeah, and Blockcrafters, right? Or go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, Adam, I just think it's important for the audience and for everyone else to distinguish two separate aspects, right? Like there's the cryptocurrency aspect, and then there's the technology that is underlying cryptocurrency, right? So those are two totally separate things. And you know, enterprises can be perfectly using that technology. You in your day-to-day life, you can see use cases as the ones that we have mentioned, and those use the technology, right? There's a lot of people who immediately associate blockchain with crypto, and it has nothing to do. You know, crypto uses the underlying technology, but it's just one of the infinite use cases that you can have by using this technology. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Definitely, there's kind of the Bitcoin and blockchain, right? It's an application, you know, built on top of it. Another question that I wanted to ask, and I'll start with you, AJ, is, and this kind of ties into a lot of things, really, is the technology advancement. You know, obviously we're advancing, and then the demand side, right? As you just mentioned, maybe the demand's not there, but the technology is there, or do you think the demand is there and the technology is still catching up? And what I mean by that is, we just talked about it, like in oil and gas. I wouldn't consider that demand, right? Maybe they're waiting for confirmation. Maybe there is, to the degree, I don't know, of the demand, right? Maybe certain companies are more advanced. And kind of going back to your point, AJ, of who has the interest, right? So from what you're seeing, blockchain's here, right? Enterprises are using it, they're dabbling into it. Would you say the demand is there for them to integrate it and the technology is just kind of catching up, or is it a match at this moment for it to blossom to fruition?
Yeah, so I think the technology is far more advanced than what the demand is asking for. That's for sure. But I think that when someone realizes that can be way more productive, have a competitive advantage, and cut costs by using this type of technology, everyone has an interest, right? And enterprises have started to realize that already. Even medium and small size companies and even startups have realized this already. So I think that the demand is growing, and it's growing exponentially. And like I said, you know, maybe 2-3 years ago, we could not find real life successful examples, but today we can, right? And we're just going to see more and more of those. You know, also to express how the future might look like and the capabilities of this technology is just not blockchain alone. Is what can blockchain do when you merge it with AI, for instance, right? So you could have, you know, let's put together the simple example. You have a hurricane hit Florida, right? As of today, disaster relief is very complicated and extremely inefficient, right? It can take more than weeks for the affected people to receive disaster relief, even more if it's monetary disaster relief, right? So now let's say that you combine blockchain technology with artificial intelligence. And what you have is a decentralized autonomous organization, which is a fancy word, you know, to just say a program coded that is connected to certain databases such as weather, forecast, geolocation, and it sees that, you know, there's going to be a hurricane, you know, going towards Florida, right? There's a fund set up there where people make public donations for disasters, right? So let's say there's 10 million accumulated, and the hurricane hits Florida, right? Then the database geolocates every single cell phone signal in the area affected, right? And it distributes the funds directly to their wallets on the phone immediately, right? Now that's disaster relief that happens instantly. And that's beautiful. And it's 100% transparent, because if I have donated money to that entity, right, which is a bunch of code, I can see the money sitting there at every single point in time. I can see how it's going to be distributed when the disaster happened. And once the disaster happened, I can see to whom has the money go to, and if it has been distributed fairly and in an adequate manner and in an efficient manner, right? So compare that 100% transparent and efficient system of disaster relief versus the system that we have today of disaster relief, right? So the possibilities are literally unlimited. That is the same as if you ask someone back in 1996, what do you think that can be done with the internet, right? Nobody would have answered, probably nobody would have answered, you can create Facebook, you can create Amazon, you can create those things. So when you ask people today, what do you think is possible with blockchain? The answer is the same. It's like nobody knows, but we're going to see tremendous things in the coming years, such as the ones that I have described, that bring incredible transparency in processes, incredible efficiencies, incredible advantages in productivity, an incredible way of cutting costs. And the possibilities are really unlimited.
Yeah, no, I think, nobody knows yet, right? I think we're in 1990 or whatever, as far as the internet phase. And Geoffrey, to go back to kind of the adoption thing, do you think it would be quickly adopted if the cost and time it took to integrate some of this technology was shortened and cheaper?
In oil and gas specifically. So yes, the cost barrier and the time it takes to get things done in oil and gas is a substantial barrier to embracing change. I'll give you just an interesting example to illustrate how much cost we're talking about. There's an oil company in Canada who had a pump that needed to be replaced, and they contacted the supplier of the pump and they said, we need a replacement. Here's the model. And the supplier said, well, I have good news. I have that exact pump in inventory, but I have a brand new pump. This one is digitally enabled. It interacts with your local communication service, backhauls data from the pump directly to a tablet. Your guys can see it on the tablet or a phone anywhere. And it only costs, so the first pump was $15,000. The new pump, $17,000. So a bit more money. Now, imagine what it takes to implement a new pump like that into an oil company. If I have to just lift out the old $15,000 pump and drop in its complete and perfect replacement, I don't have to change any documentation. I don't have to train any new workers. I don't have to integrate it into the control room. I don't have to test its ability to stop and start on in fail-safe conditions. That $17,000 pump is $300,000 worth of implementation cost.
Wow.
Okay. So bringing technology into oil and gas, specifically the front end and operational technology world where things are in steel and cement and hard, that lowering the implementation cost of blockchain does not change the fact that you have these other quite significant elements of the business that also need to embrace change. So I can take 30% out of the cost of implementing blockchain for a company, but I still have to deal with this entire management of change process. And blockchain has done nothing to lower that cost.
Yeah.
Nothing.
And I think, and we've been having those conversations as well. And the reason why I asked that is, we're trying to figure out a way to kind of spur rapid innovation, right? And bring those costs down, because I think going back to the use cases, we've talked about Bitcoin is a use case and application right on blockchain. I had a conversation the other day that or Christian actually, AJ, Christian, he thinks Bitcoin's the only like application that makes blockchain suitable. And I kind of agree, like that's been tested and tried and it's still scaled. And now we're going through these roller coaster, markets. But I think that adoption rate, I think we got to bring down that cost and make it easier, because if we can do that, then we'll have more use cases. I think we have a lot of supply chain stuff. Everybody has other ideas around identities and healthcare, but I think the cost is just too high. And I wanted to touch base, or go ahead, AJ, if you want to say something. I want to have Hugo jump in too on something else.
Yeah, I just want to touch very quickly on the cost part, right? So this is like everything else. In the past, having a photo from a satellite was tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, today you can see anything using Google Maps on your phone. Okay, this is no different, right? Like when it started, it might have been very, very costly, but even as of today, we have a solution that you can implement supply chain traceability for $2,000 from the farm to the shelf, and the users can see it in their phone scanning a QR code. $2,000. Now, which enterprise can afford $2,000? The answer is 99.9%, right? So I think we are getting to that point that the cost is becoming very, very low for certain use cases that have been already tested. There has been a lot of R&D in those, and the cost has been greatly reduced, right? Eventually, this was taken and even another step, it will convert into software as a service, right? So you will not even know that you're using blockchain, right? You will not even know. You're just buying a service on a website, right? And then the cost would be reduced, 10 times even more, right? But for certain cases, it's at a point today where for $2,000, you can have underlying blockchain technology tracing your entire supply chain, right? And that's the beauty of it. So, yes, for certain use cases where you need to re-educate your entire workforce, such as Geoffrey has explained in the oil and gas industry, it might be cost prohibitive, to implement certain technologies. But so for some others where there's no re-education of the workforce whatsoever, right? You can spin it off, start cutting costs, incrementing productivity, and even achieving, a bump in your price of your product, for virtually no cost, right? So it's great, and we're gonna see the adoption going exponential.
Yeah, let me give you the example of where it does work and specifically in oil and gas. So the use case with Repsol involves tracking and tracing the samples of the products that come out of the refinery. So when we buy gasoline, it's got to meet a certain specification. So much iron, so much octane, so much heavy metals, and so much sulfur. And so there's labs that test the product to make sure that it contains exactly what the refinery said it should contain. And those samples have to be tracked. And it's not dissimilar, AJ, to, organic produce. It's the same thing. It came from a source, and I need to be absolutely sure that this product does not contain contaminants, because, you take it into some markets and it'll be prohibited. Yeah. So they put a blockchain application in place that tracks all the documentation all the way through the chain, so that you can take a specific cargo of product and you can go right back to the refinery, exactly when it was made, what was in it, and so on. That is a good use case. No one had to go in and change a pump and rip out some piece of steel. You could do it all much more gracefully and quickly. And so that's, to my mind, is where blockchain that's where it's going to win in oil and gas, is in those use cases first.
And Hugo, to kind of tie this into Blockcrafters too a little bit, we've been talking about kind of the challenges and barriers integrating blockchain into kind of traditional aspects. Give me some insight into what Blockcrafters has been doing as far as the startup world, right? I mean, you guys are investing in projects, You're incubating projects, providing resources. I talked to your team, I think last year. What's been going on in your neck of the woods as far as a company and kind of your outlook, and what have you been up to for the last 12 months?
Yes, thank you. Before that, I totally agree that the technology of a blockchain is grows so fast. So I take some example in Korea, and which is our investment company. Middle of last year, Korea project team make a big event, which is that one project team alliance with the biggest Korean bakery, and if the users buy some bread in that bakery and agree with give some users information to that, then they give their tokens to the users. It's so simple, and if the users maybe get a $5 bread in that bakery, he pay back about $2 for that token. It's a so impressive event, we think, but we find that most public don't care about backside technology. They only focus on how it is convenience, and is it directly connected to the real money. They only focus on that. They don't care is the blockchain, is it new technology or somewhere, because the project already make a good wallet based on the blockchain, and they also connect to the DEX exchanges tokens. So it's easy to change your bidding, but hopefully they get those tokens when they buy a bread in the famous bakery, but they don't know how to use it. It's difficult for the public users. I think this is a big barrier for the adoption of blockchain. Some people say that 20 years ago, internet is so amazing, but they don't know how to grow it. Yeah, I agree with that, but the growing is showing for the public person via Facebook or Messenger. What I mean is that most of people do not care the back. They only focus on is it convenience, is it directly connected to my money? They only focus on that. So I think if the public users use more prevalently the blockchain or this technology, we need to hide of this technology for the funny front, I think. So we still focus on find this company in the Korea, Asia, or and then we still have a line to invest those company, and also we have another arm to operate our crypto finance service, which is a HaruBank. So yeah, we still try to do it for focusing on the users. That's our theme, our company's theme.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think, streamlining the process is kind of the overall goal, the overall goal here in general, regardless of what industry you're in. AJ has some solutions right on the apps that brings that cost down. Geoffrey, we're trying to identify, certain aspects of blockchain are pretty easy to kind of integrate, and certain aspects are not. Hugo, real quick, do you think the increase in Bitcoin price brings more adoption? Or it doesn't matter?
Don't do that. If I know it, I'll be a leech, but I don't know that. But I believe that Bitcoin is a rare things, rare symbol. So the price would go up in the future, I think, but I don't know when.
No. The Bitcoin price go up, but do you think that increases adoption?
It's some different because some people said already that, but technology, blockchain, and the cryptocurrency is different. So if the Bitcoin price go up, lots of people only focus on the cryptocurrency. They do not care about the blockchain. They're different.
Good answer. Good. Kind of straight to the point. And then going back to AJ, and we got a couple minutes here. We'll try and finish this thing up, but I kind of want to conclude with like decentralization and centralization as far as, is that important?
It's absolutely important, right? 100%. You want systems that are fair, transparent, and cannot be manipulated, right? So you can create that with blockchain.
How about a private or public blockchain? Does that matter? Is there a degree there that gives you best of both worlds, or how does that even look as far as, maybe I'm on a private chain, an intranet and internet, right? So I'm on a private chain and then I'm going to push some data up. Is that, or like the consortiums of, R3 Corda or
right.
Hedera,
So
like that?
Yeah. So it depends. I guess it depends on what is it that you want to try to achieve, right? So let's take back the example that we have said before, where you have a disaster relief fund where people contribute through donations. Now, do you want that to be obscure? No. You want that to be absolutely transparent, right? So ideally, you would build that in a public blockchain, let's say on the Ethereum protocol, or any other one that is suitable to, right? But where people can actually see everything and every single transaction that happens there, right? Now, if it's my personal company exchanging IP with your company, right? Perhaps we don't want that to be seen by everyone, right? So in that case, perhaps we can build a private blockchain solution between our companies, right? That fulfills the purpose of that exchange of IP, right? So I think that both can totally coexist. It's just going to be a matter of, which one is more adequate for each particular case, right?
There's going to be optionality.
I think so. It might so happen, right, that big protocols such as Ethereum, they create a layer of, that it allows to obfuscate, certain transactions, and then, you can deploy a public blockchain for a private purpose, right? So that can happen too, and we don't know. But one thing I can tell you is that right now, there's more than 100 protocols out there, and a lot of them are not necessary, right? Meaning that they're all trying to do, the same thing, but in a slightly different way. And at the end, it's just going to be a handful of those that get used, right? And it's going to be a race for adoption, really. So, we're not going to have more than 100 protocols in the future because there's no need for existence of so many.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be like 20 that just interop with each other?
Interoperability already exists, right? Which is great, and people are filing patents left and right when it comes to that, right? So you might have, when you want like heavy attack resistant, you might take the characteristics of Bitcoin. When you want the characteristics of programmability, you might take Ethereum, right? When you want the characteristics of speed, you might take Stellar, right? And they can be perfectly interoperable between them. So you can take the best of each world to create your own solution, right? And we're getting there, and we're getting there very, very fast, which is fantastic.
And I think that's kind of one of the questions I want to pose to you, Geoffrey, as far as private versus public. I didn't even touch on that as far as, all right, we're integrating blockchain, but then there's a degree of, is it like public blockchain, or is it a quorum kind of deal, a hyperledger kind of approach? What kind of discussions are going on your end, Geoffrey?
In the oil and gas industry, there is a concern out there that the technologies, to AJ's point, are still battling for some form of leadership or supremacy. And so it feels a little bit, if you're old enough, you'll remember Betamax and VHS, the battle that went on for to see which technology would land. So the oil and gas industry is waiting for the technologies to clarify around which ones are going to be market leaders. That it contributes to a holding back of investment because of the fact that the lack of clarity means that investments made today may find themselves stranded because the the market's moved and some other technology or some other protocol has become the the market leader, if you like. So I think this was a quote directly from a blockchain conference last year in Houston. AJ and I were both at, but there was a lawyer from one of the world's larger oil and gas companies, and his view was these underlying protocols all get commoditized at some point. And let's, don't get into warfare over which protocol. The company I do work with in Europe called Finboot has developed a middleware technology that doesn't really care. It's agnostic as to what the protocols are underneath. And so you develop your solution, your business solution, in a middleware layer, and you don't worry about the underlying technologies. And I think that's a very, very clear direction that will make sense to a lot of oil and gas professionals. You don't have to worry about what goes on under the covers. You don't need to be a blockchain nerd to be able to work with this stuff. You can work with it at a middleware layer. You can insulate yourself from the volatility that's underneath. That becomes a very compelling and very interesting argument that works with oil and gas. And I'll use just one last point just to kind of make this clear. There is always the worry in oil and gas that if you are overly tied to one thing or you do not have optionality in your business model, you will be subject to rents. And this was a reason why oil and gas companies didn't embrace cloud computing when it first came out. They said, once all of our data, the oil and gas companies have very, very large data sets. Once that gets posted on one cloud environment, very hard to get it off and move it to somebody else. And therefore, you're going to be overcharged for that. You're going to be abused by the market for that. And so oil and gas people are very, very alert to this as a concern. And so back to the answer. How do you manage the application world that you're delivering with blockchain so that you're not subject to those rents and that extortion that can come about? Hence this logic of middleware and working at a higher level of abstraction.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Hugo, real quick, what do you think of the correlation with kind of Bitcoin and the overall general market?
Correlation?
The correlation with Bitcoin and then the pandemic, right? There's kind of this short-term correlation. I haven't followed it, AJ. I'm sure you have some insight, but what do you think about that correlation of Bitcoin and the stock market?
Actually, these days, Bitcoin price and New York index is high correlation with this index. So our active trading team lead said that it's so funny because a lot of money is prevailed in not only US but also global. The monies don't know where to go because a lot of performance of the enterprise is not good. So the stock, first of all, lots of money go to the stock market, but they still search for which market is go up. So amount of those money move to the Bitcoin, and this make a upward of the Bitcoin, I think.
Yeah, interesting. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, AJ. We're gonna close this out, but I want to get your last statement on kind of that correlation. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think in the past the correlation was not there, right? And this is something that it's easy to run, right? Like you can take the historic data of the the crypto markets. You can take the historic data of, let's say, the S&P 500, and you just run a correlation analysis. It's pure math, right? And it tells you what the correlation is. The trick here is the timeline, right? So you can run the correlation into the entire history, or you can run the correlation in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, right? And that's going to give you a very different number, right? So if you run it into the entire history, the result is going to be they're not correlated, right? But if you run it in, let's say, the last 3 months, there's a high correlation, right? So then the question is going to be, what's going to happen in the future? Is are we going to see that correlation keeps going more and more, or is it going to go back to less and less, right? And we don't know. But as of today, if you run the math, and anyone can run the math, you just take an Excel sheet, you put the history of, let's say the total market cap of crypto markets, right, by day. You put the history of the S&P 500, and you run a correlation analysis, which is just an Excel formula. If you run it for the last 3 months, correlation is pretty high. If you run it for the last 6 months, it's a little bit less. And if you run it for the entire history, it will say that it's not correlated. So that we can say certainly, right? Because we have the data. Now, nobody can predict the future, and we cannot know what the correlation is going to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, or a year from now, or even more than that, right? But with certainty can say that for the last months, it has been highly correlated.
Yeah, interesting enough, right? It depends on what time frame that you're putting in there, right? Like the short term and the medium term, the long term. So, everybody, was kind of, not in uproar, right? But watching closely on how Bitcoin would survive, and it seemed like it withheld. It needed this test, right? And we'll kind of see as this thing transitions forward. But first of all, I appreciate you guys, and it looks like we're coming up on time here. I want to thank Geoffrey and Alvaro, AJ, and Hugo visiting and joining us for Reimagine 2020. We talked about a bunch of things, right? Blockchain and competitive advantages. We talked about blockchain in Korea. We talked about blockchain in oil and gas and some of those challenges and barriers. I guess we can all agree on, though, that blockchain is here to stay for quite some time, and we're at the early stages. I shouldn't say that. We're at a growth phase, right? We've been at the early stages for quite some time, and I think the next step is going to be growth, and we'll see where this goes. But first of all, thank you guys for joining us at this conference. To all the viewers and audience out there, stay safe during this pandemic. We hope you had a good time. Where can everybody find you, actually? Geoffrey, where can people find you?
I am available on virtually everywhere, every platform you can think of. So my Twitter handle is @Geoffrey Cann. My website is geoffreycann.com. My podcast, which is on Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio and iTunes, is called Digital Oil and Gas. My book is called Bits, Bytes, and Barrels. It's available on Amazon and iTunes in paperback, ebook, and audio format with Audible. My online training course on digital oil and gas is called Digital Oil and Gas, and it's on Udemy. So if people want to track me down, just look for Digital Oil and Gas online. You should be able to pick me out of the Google search.
How about yourself, AJ? Where can people find you? Or
so the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. So they can see on this video my first name and last name. So it's my last name is repeated twice. So Alvaro Jimenez. And that's on LinkedIn. And if they want to follow me on Twitter, that I post several times a day, it's Alvaro Jimenez J6.
Appreciate that. Hugo, where can our audience find you or get a hold of you?
Yeah, similar with AJ, just visit my LinkedIn and also visit our service, HaruBank.com. This is our scheme is just in here.
Perfect. One last question. We have a lot of students watching right now. Is there anything that you want to kind of let them know, whether that's, finding new opportunities, following their goals, developers? I'm not sure, but we have a lot of students out there that are probably trying to identify, what the next step is for them, and whether that's maybe the business aspect, maybe that's an industry kind of aspect or technical. Do you have anything that you want to share with them before we conclude this panel? We'll start with Hugo. Do you want to share anything with the students out there?
Actually, in Korea, a lot of students focus on the startup, and they search the industry like AI, blockchain, or somewhere. I just say that blockchain still have a lot of opportunity. Just try it.
Great. AJ?
Yeah, well, I will say, to the students, you're on the right place at the right time. It doesn't matter if you are a developer, you're in sales, or you're in marketing or anything else. If you were in any discipline, in the cloud 10 years ago, you would have been in the same place as today being on blockchain. Meaning, whoever was on starting in the cloud 10 years ago, just selling cloud, marketing cloud, or developing cloud, today is probably in a very, very good position, right? Not only professionally, but financially too. With blockchain, it's the exact same thing. It doesn't matter what your skills are. If you are in this industry or artificial intelligence or any of the other exponential technologies, you're in a very good place. And the reason being, in the next decade, exponential technologies are going to generate, it's estimated that it's going to generate more wealth just in those group of exponential technologies than we have generated in the entire prior history of humankind, right? So if you're in any of those pockets, and one of them is blockchain, you're in a very good place.
Geoffrey, any last minute words of wisdom?
Totally agree with Alvaro. The being positioned on anything that's growing exponentially, by definition, means there's a shortage of know-how and expertise, and that's what creates that personal opportunity. I would also note, though, for those students who are, say, specializing in some other industrial area, agriculture, banking, retail, or in my case, oil and gas, the same logic also applies. The combination of that domain expertise and innovative exponential technologies is also quite rare. It's even rarer to be an expert in blockchain and oil and gas. So combination of the two is not to be ignored either. So if any of the students who are watching this are already experts in some other field and wondering, should I go into blockchain, the combination of those two is going to be extremely potent.
Right. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. For all of you watching, thanks for tuning in. You heard it from the best here. It looks like there's a lot of opportunity within blockchain, regardless of what you're studying or what your past is. There's sales, business development, developers, marketing, and then just the entrepreneurial spirit is probably what's going to carry you. And that goes across all industries and verticals. So again, thank you for tuning in to Reimagine 2020. I'm your host, Adam, and hopefully you enjoy this. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Stay tuned to learn more about student interest in blockchain technology. Reimagine 2020.